Welcome to the Actors Podcast. I'm Douglas Taurel, and I have a deep passion for the craft of acting and everything that involves the business of acting. I'm an actor, producer, and a writer, and I've been in the trenches just like you. And like you, I have the audition and producing scars to prove it. Here on this podcast, we try to help actors take control of their careers, one episode at a time. Today, I get the incredible honor to speak to Janet Shea, a distinguished figure in New Orleans theater with a career spanning over 6 decades as an actress, director, and educator. She has been part of over 300 productions, and she's been recognized for multiple awards for her contribution to the arts as an actress and as a director. It's a great honor to bring Janet Shea onto the Actors Podcast. Welcome to the Actors Podcast. I have a legendary actress with me.
Hello, how are you?
How are you doing?
Shea.
And she's also known, I should let everybody know, as the First Lady of New Orleans.
That's because I'm the oldest.
You outlasted them all.
That's the secret.
I should tell everybody how I know Janet. I performed my one-man show during COVID at the Jefferson Performing Arts Center. You left me a note, and it was a lovely note. And I can't remember who, someone from the theater gave it to me or told me about it. And I said, who is that? Because sometimes in my play, veterans or military families will leave me notes. And so I don't know if it's a Gold Star family or a military mother or whoever, a veteran. And I remember the guy going, oh, she's a legend here in New Orleans. I go, who is she? She's an actress. And immediately my imagination picked up. I go, oh, she's like a legend. She's been acting here forever. And so I looked you up and I was like, oh, I got to friend her, because I have such a deep passion theater to know someone who's dedicated their life to them. I needed to connect. And so that's how I connected with you. And that's how I got introduced to you.
You know that I don't spend my life in theater sending notes backstage to people, but I was truly moved, amazed, and impressed by everything you did on the stage when you showed veterans, several of them, different spans of their lives. And it really, really touched, your performance really touched me. So I had to send you a note. I just couldn't leave without sending you a note.
Oh, that's so special. That's so great. Janet, do me a favor, tilt your camera down a little bit. Perfect. You can say closer too, but just a little bit. When you go down, I cut your...
All right, so don't lean on my arms.
Or too much. You've dedicated your life to theater, and we're going to talk about different things. Theater, what it means to you, and lessons for younger artists. I have a very deep passion for theater, for acting, but specifically theater. That's what got into my bones early on as an actor. I love film acting because I always explain to people, when people ask me, what's the difference between theater and film? I say, well, acting is acting, but the passion that I have for film acting is I was pretty good in math as a kid. And film acting is very mathematical to me because you have to understand angles. You have to understand camera lenses. You have to understand shots. You can communicate a lot when you understand those things. Like if this is a master shot, if this is a tight, how tight, and that aspect of film acting, at least for me as an actor and as a director, I love because it's a different modality in your artistic brain that you have to focus on. You have to, it's really, that's like they say, it's acting with a broadsword or acting with a laser. And they're both wonderful arts, but they're different and have different passions and this, the thing about film acting is you can, as an actor, pay attention. When someone lights the scene, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a very moody scene, or this is going to be a very dark scene. I can start getting an idea what the director wants from the lighting of the scene. And theater's different, right? Theater's completely different. You don't really get that. And so, but that being said, like you've been as a theater actor for so many years, what's kept you going? What's inspired you to keep going, to keep getting on stage and sharing your art?
What has inspired me to keep going? I guess a lot of things. First of all, it's just where I feel that I need to be. I just love doing what I do. It's not so much my ego, although I do have one. We all have one. It's like something in your DNA that tells you this is just where you belong. Also, I tend to be rather shy as a person. And
it's funny how most of us are, isn't it?
Yes, my emotions are fulfilled when I'm inside of another character. I can express really weird emotions and stupid emotions that live in me, but I just kind of keep repressed most of it. Okay. Does
I
that
had a
make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, reminds me of a saying that a director once told me. He says, actors, specifically actors, are athletes of the heart. And I love that phrase because we have to go emotionally in places that most people just don't want to go. They choose not to go there, crying, anger, whatever the emotion is. But, not doing that for us, I think why we have a spiritual connection, even though we've never really physically met, but I think we're cut from the same emotional cloth. Is not doing it is like spiritual suicide.
Mm.
And
Yes.
that's kind of what I get out of it.
Yeah, I absolutely can relate to what you're saying. I'm not saying it's a necessity because I could certainly live without it. And I do many other things that are kind of related to it. The soul of it is just doing it, it's just getting into the skin of another human being.
What you just said, just doing it. I remember I had the honor to work with Marion Seldes in a play, a wonderful woman and very sophisticated. I didn't know who she was when I was in the play with her. I was very young. It was early in New York. I was 2002, maybe, And I remember I was in the play. We were in the reading, and the director was really nervous because she was coming. We were doing the table reading. We were doing some new play. I can't remember it, but I was playing her nephew. And the director, Marion Seldes is coming, guys. So please be on time. Please be prepared. I was personal training at the time, and I also had, that's the great thing about New York, I'm sure New Orleans has the same stuff, but one of my clients was this legendary opera reviewer. And he was like a sieve for theater. I mean, he just knew, he would tell me stories that I didn't even heard of about Marilyn Monroe and about John Huston. We would spend the whole hour talking about theater, even though when I should have been talking about how to get him healthier. But he would just start talking about Marilyn Monroe. And he said, "Do you know who Marion Seldes is?" When I said, "No, I've never even heard of her." You should look her up. And she's that's where my death trap story at that time. I think she's inducted into the Theater Hall of Fame, but she has the longest run of never missing a performance with any Broadway production. And the play she did that with was Death Trap.
Wow.
And she never missed a show. I think it ran for a long time and it was a record. I said, that must have sucked to pin her understudy. That would have been horrible because she's not coming off. She's just not coming off. But I got into acting late and I was always an insecure actor because I never felt like I was an actor. And I was always studying with people who, they've been studying since they were little. And so I have this passion to learn from greats like you and Marion. And I asked her, I said, what can I do to become a better actor, Miss Seldes? She would say, "Seldes, darling, Seldes." And I would say, "Miss Seldes, can I do?" She goes, "Just do theater. Do as much theater as you can possibly do. See theater. Go to the theater. Do as much." And she says exactly what, just do it. And I took that to heart and would do as much as I possibly could and see as much as I possibly could. And there's so much you can learn from just doing, from just doing it.
Absolutely. And different directors. You can learn so much from directors that you don't learn in a classroom setting, just what they're looking for, what they want from you, how their vision. And I just love all of that part too.
Yeah, and that's the benefit. I know you've directed plays, which we'll go into, but that's the benefit of directing as an actor, other actors is I've only directed one major TV series, but I had and I like to do it again. I had such a wonderful experience doing it. And so many actors came up to me and then we had some good stars in the series. And they said, it was so awesome to be directed by you. You're so respectful and but I always say it because when you have a career as an actor, you get directed by assholes and you get directed by and someone who should not be directors. And Win Hanman used to always say a director should have a license because, so you take bits and pieces of what works, what doesn't work, and you put that into your repertoire as how you would like to be directed and how you would not want to be directed. So when you direct, You use only the good stuff that you've been able to accumulate as an actor. Like, I love this I remember when that director did that. I hated when that director did that. Simple things like with camera, I would always whisper to the actor in their ear about a direction I wanted to go in, not to make them feel conscious. I would always say, that was great. Why don't we try X? Let's try this. And maybe, what do you want to do on this next take? That would free them up. It kept them private. It didn't make them feel conscious that people were judging them because, as actors, we're always judging ourselves. And then when direction is given loud, sometimes some actors can take that, oh, I suck. I'm not doing it right. And then that spins them in a direction that you don't want to go in. As a director, you just want to get something different. You want to see something different. You're trying to put a mosaic together and you're trying to figure out what that mosaic is. But doesn't mean this piece that you gave me as an actor is bad. It's just not the one I want, I think.
Right. It doesn't fit in with the rest of the picture.
Yeah.
That we're going for.
That we're going for. Do you remember what was the first thing were your parents actors or artists?
No, nobody in my family.
Are you from New Orleans? Were you born there?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I am. No, I spent my childhood because my father was a veteran, and maybe that's the connection I have. My father was a veteran, but he was in a veterans hospital for all of the time that I knew him until he passed away when I was 12. He got sick when my mother was pregnant with me. So I grew up living with my Italian immigrant grandparents.
Oh, wow. What a story.
Yes. I just felt, I guess when I look back on it, I didn't feel displaced at the time, but now looking back on it, I really was, because my grandmother was sick and my grandfather was the one who took me to school, did my homework with me. He was all of that to me. I grew up with a fantastic imagination because I spent most of my time alone. And then when I went to school, I was very shy and I kept to myself. And it was kind of my story going through school until I got in a drama club at school. And that's when I really started to be able to come out and feel like I belong somewhere. Isn't that odd?
Do you remember the play that you first did?
Oh, it was, let's see, I was junior in high school. It was, I don't remember that. Dark Eyes. Yes, it was a one-act play, and I was blind. And then I didn't know what to do with my life. My mother, we didn't have any money, but my brothers, older than I am, my older brother, genius guy, and he got his MD when he was 21 years old. He was the one who decided I should be educated. And he paid for everything.
Your brother did?
Yes. He sent me to singing lessons, sent me to piano lessons. He paid my tuition in college. And that's where it was a nun that pushed me and gave me big roles in college. And that's where I just really started to learn. When I was still in college, I started getting roles at Le Petit, with that theater in the French Quarter, the famous one. And then it just it became my lifeblood. It took me a long time, but once it started, it didn't stop.
No. Is your brother still around?
No, he passed away in 2015, but I owe everything to him.
What was his name?
Richard. Dr. Richard L. Bagnetto.
Well, Richard, if you hear us, rest in peace, friend. Yeah. I remember my first play. I won't go too much into it, but I got into it because of a girl in college. And so I wanted to impress her, and they didn't know what I was doing. And so there was this very, I tried to connect with him, but there was this very dynamic Black actor, and he was like, I'm going to audition for the theater department. I was at a junior college. I'm going to do it. And he was just so excited, man. He was so, and he was like, his name was Marcus Wiley. And I said, is that an open audition? He goes, yeah, man. Yeah, man. Come on down, man. Audition, man. It's going to be great. And I did. And I was an alligator for a children's show.
Oh, wonderful. That was fun.
Well, I didn't even know what I was doing. Her name was Pat Baldwin, she was the artistic director, and we later became friends. She offered me a scholarship, but she said, "Well, what can you do, son? What kind of animals can you do?" Because they were casting for children's shows, and for the most part, all the parts were animals, very typical children's shows. And I said, "Well, I can be an alligator because I used to break dance when I was in high school. I can do this one move called the centipede." So I was doing the centipede and acting like an alligator. And she go, "Okay, great." And I remember going on the wall when you go to the wall to see your list. Hey, I make the play. So to this day, I always tell that story. I was an alligator. I always remember it.
Yeah.
What was the theater scene back when you started really pursuing professional acting in your 20s?
Well, this is the other part of me because I always wanted babies. I always wanted to have a family. And so I got married. I have 3 children, and for 7 years, I didn't do any theater.
And how old were you when you got married?
I was 21. I graduated from college on a Sunday and got married the following Saturday. I didn't know anything. Truly, I did some acting until I started having babies. After 7 years, a director called me back. He was doing It's Another Blind Girl. Oh, what was it? I'm trying to think of the movie. Audrey Hepburn was in the movie. Now I'm having a senior moment. And she was blind. But anyway, he said, "I want you to play this role." And I said, "Oh my God, 7 years, I'm afraid." And he said, "Oh, no, you'll be fine." He took care of me. I came back. And from that time on, my children just had to grow up in green rooms. That was it. I guess your children do the same thing.
Yeah.
They had to just follow along. So, yes. And then from that point on, I've just been doing like 2 and 3 shows a year because we don't have long runs down here. 6 weeks is about as long as you would
Do a show. Yeah. Well, a lot of the shows now are pretty much 6 weeks. They're not like in the old days where they would run 3 months, unless it's super successful or a crazy expensive, successful musical, then they'll run it. But for the most part, if you get more than 6 weeks, you're done, you've kind of won the lottery. Oh, yeah.
Big theater, like that big theater that you were in at J-Pass. Yeah, 2 weekends and
Oh, yeah. No, I
seats
mean,
1,000 people,
you get a bad review in New York and you're done.
Yes.
You're done. They shut you down. What was the theater scene like?
What was the theater scene like? I'll tell you, the theater scene was all volunteer. It was all volunteer until I'm thinking maybe around late 60s, early 70s, when 2 gentlemen came down from LA and they opened a dinner theater here called the Beverly Dinner Playhouse. And it became a union house. And that's where I got my equity card, is working there for them. And so that was a delight. A lot of local actors did get their
A lot of shows going on?
Oh, yeah. There was they had maybe like 4 or 5 productions a year.
All in the French Quarter?
All in the same place, yes.
Yeah.
It was a lovely theater. I think it had like 499 seats, something like that. It was buffet dinner, and then the buffet was over and the show would start. And I was actually in one of their shows and rehearsing for the next one when the theater burned down. Something crazy with the air conditioning system. And then a lot of people from here moved. Some went to one coast, some went to another coast. But I stayed here and still worked with other companies. By that time, there was Southern Rep, which did equity productions, or would use equity actors, I should say. And then NOLA Project came along. There are just a lot of different little theaters.
New Orleans, what people don't know, a lot of people think, obviously New York is an iconic theater town and always has been, but people forget that, many people make I don't know, maybe I'm making a generalization, but people forget that New Orleans is the oldest city in the United States. It's the oldest city. It's where Lewis and Clark were trading with the Indians down in the bottom of the Mississippi River. It's very old, very iconic, and it's got a tremendous history. I mean, it's a very different history than let's say New York or Chicago or Boston, which are all old American cities. But New Orleans is such an iconic city because it came out from the very beginning of what the North American lands were being made from. You're getting explorers trading with Indians, and then you were getting the beginning of this trade and commerce that was coming into the port of New Orleans, and you got the French, and you've got, it's just an amazing history. And theater wise, I think because of that history, it's always been able to attract and create many artists. I think many artists have come out of that history because when you have such a vibrant inner commerce, and I think there's a connection there when a city has a lot of trade, business trade, and people going in and going out. It brings in artists, it brings in different cultures, and then some of those cultures decide to
Really,
stay there.
it's a cultural mix. It
It's a
truly
cultural
is.
mix. And I used to love reading about, because I love Tennessee Williams. He's one of my favorite. I mean, I have many
That's
favorites.
the company I worked in, the Tennessee Williams Theater Company, and I should mention that because they've given me wonderful roles.
Are they still there in New Orleans?
They're still here. They're still here.
I know there's another one that opened up and I know the guy who started it in Provincetown, because he spent a lot of time in Provincetown. And so I know there's another one up there. But I used to love reading about Tennessee going to New Orleans when he was young. Every time I go to New Orleans, I'm a big history buff, as you can imagine. My imagination runs when I go to the French Quarter and I think about, the people who must have walked through here, touched these old rails and sat on these stoops at certain times.
I do the same thing.
I love the story that, I think when he met Marlon Brando was a plumber, I think, in New Orleans. Tennessee was talking to Eliza Kazan, or I think, what was the story? The story was he met, and there's rumors that he had an affair with Marlon Brando in New Orleans. We don't know if that was true.
Really?
There was a lot of rumors that people believe Marlon swung on both sides of the fence. But I think Eliza Kazan told Tennessee Williams, when did you go to New Orleans and meet this actor I'm thinking of casting as Stanley? And he met him and he came back and he told Kazan, I love him. He's perfect. And there's always a famous story when they were in rehearsal, Elijah Kazan, right? Am I saying his name right?
I think it's Ilya.
Ilya Kazan. Yeah. And he says, hey, man, this kid, Marlon Brando, is taking over the play. Like, this is not a Blanche story anymore. This is a Stanley story. And he's like, we have a problem here. And Tennessee was like, I don't care. Let him do whatever he wants. I love it. And that's a very famous story.
That's very Tennessee.
Very Tennessee Williams. Yeah. And he loved Marlon, and when I studied with Win Handman in Carnegie Hall when I was in New York, he lived, when he was doing Streetcar, he was living in Carnegie Mellon, because people forget that Carnegie Mellon in those days was housed for artists. It was nothing but artists in Carnegie Mellon. And his apartment, Wint's class was on the 10th floor, and Carnegie Mellon had half floors, 10 and a half, 10, 10 and a half, 11, 11 and a half. Marlon Brando's apartment was on the 10 and a half floor next to the men's bathroom. And that was his apartment doing Streetcar. It was an office when I was studying there, but all the guy actors knew about that. So whenever the way Wynn's classes would work, he would say, okay, he would put it on the chalkboard. He would write all the scenes that were going to be done for the day. So the scene that was coming up, those actors would step outside and prepare. If you were a guy, you would always go up to the Marlon Brando door and rub it for good luck. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it did not work. But it was always amazing to know that we were studying in a place where he lived.
Yes.
Yeah. But the New Orleans scenes is always so amazing. And I guess it leads me into the next question. What New Orleans was, the theater scene, when you first got into it, how do you think it's changed now? Is the theater scene, because New Orleans, the city itself, is struggling, and is it vibrant still, or how has it changed?
Since COVID, that it seems like a lot of changes. I think people right now don't have money to go to theater. Some theaters are doing fairly well. It's just different right now. It's coming back. We have now a lot of small theater companies who have a group of people who have gotten together, and it's like they have their own stable of people that they use over and over. The problem is there is no venue. There is no venue. So a lot of theaters have to use Loyola University stage will let other theater companies come and use their place. So it's a struggle for space. Um, some
Which
theaters
is a struggle
happening,
everywhere now.
yeah, some theaters happening, let's say in bar rooms and nightclubs. There's one theater in Slidell that happens in a beauty salon. People just go wherever they can. There's um there have been some changes. I think Crescent City Company has come in and created another equity house here, although they don't have a venue either, so they use other locations. Tennessee Williams Theater Company has been using Maroney Opera House and Loyola. It's just strange that theaters don't have a home. The thing with Le Petit has its home. Rivertown and Kenner has its home. JPA, where we both work, has two homes, really. One on an airline drive and one on the other
Yeah.
side of the river.
Places.
Yes, beautiful spaces. So that I could say that it would really be nice if every company had its own space. I'm thinking in their own terms right now. That would be good for them instead of having to find a place to do their productions. As far as productions going, there's a lot of new work. Some theaters just do new plays. Some do a mixture. Some just do musicals. It's just a variety of.
Yeah, real estate has been an issue all over the country.
Mhm.
I mean, the world's gotten expensive, and in great cities, in big cities, real estate is a premium. Any landlord
Yeah.
that has a theater space, they're like, I can either I can have, excuse me, I can have a theater company, or I can sell this place for a couple of $1,000,000. And so the yeah, you hate
That's
to do it.
unfortunate.
Yeah,
But
it's the nature of the economics, and that's happened in New York as well. And that's happened. I mean, that happens. It's happened all over Texas. I mean, theater. I mean, yeah. I mean, a lot of landlords are selling. They're not filling up. You know, I think there's multiple challenges to that. I think, you know, at least when you were starting in the business, your forms of entertainment were limited, right? As a human, as a citizen. And today, it's, I mean, you've got your phone, and you've got, to get. I always, whenever I perform my play, I give such a sincere thank you to the people who actually made it out to my show, because
Mhm. Absolutely.
because
Because also there's streaming now. And people can see whatever they want to, anytime they want to. It's just uh,
opera has been doing that. Opera kind of got onto that idea. Opera has been streaming their shows because they've realized that a lot of people don't want to come to the theater. And also, opera is a different story, but opera's so expensive.
it is expensive.
It's crazy expensive, and that, and who has 4 hours, 5 hours to go see an opera show unless you're retired?
That's the other thing that I see, and I see that with audiences. Audiences, if something is running over 2 hours in length, if a show is running it, they get antsy.
They're ready to get out. They're scratching their ass and saying, when is this play?
Yeah, and I think a lot of productions, and we do have at Tulane, we have a Shakespeare company, and we also have Tulane Summer Lyric, which does 3 musicals in the summer. The Shakespeare people are doing different versions of Shakespeare just to accommodate the audience. But
And the condition is spanning across generations. It's not, it's not, even the older generations have been conditioned to be so stimulated from their phones, from their computers, that they don't have the patience to sit there and let a story unravel for 3 hours. They just don't.
Mhm.
They're conditioned to get up and go, get up and go, get up and go. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, I have to make such a concerted effort to tell every generation, but a lot of the offenders of phones going off in the show is older generations to me. I mean, I always tell the stage manager or the who's ever producing me, please, making a concerted effort, like say it 3 times. Turn off your phone. Turn
Right
off your
off the
phone.
phone.
Turn off your phone. Don't put it on vibrate. Check your phone. And there's still, even with that hammering, there's still one person where their phone is still going off,
Right.
And what that tells me is that everyone's on the phone. Every generation's on the phone. But it's not just the younger generations, it's the older generations as well. So they're also being conditioned, like you said, you get to about 90 minutes, they're already like, okay, let's conclude this play. I don't know if, I mean, can you do, a mammoth play, a full long mammoth play anymore, or,
Oh,
or
I don't
tennis.
know. I'm right now. I'm in Murder on the Nile, which is Agatha Christie, and it's written in 3 acts.
Oh my gosh. Is it a dinner?
No, no. It's a production at in the Jefferson
J-Pack?
Parish, and so what our director had done is made it 2 acts, and it has a pace to it. It's nice, but when we were in rehearsals, because it took us a while to shave it down, just to just picking up cues and all of that. It was running like 2 hours and 30 minutes, and we were all worried. But we finally got it down to maybe 2 hours and 5 minutes.
What did you do?
No, didn't cut
Just
scenes
pace?
out. Just you pick up the pace and scene changes and things that happen. The stage food comes in, whoop, and out, and we keep going.
Yeah, that's the thing now with all acting, but it's even true on TV now.
Right.
Yeah, your pace.
The pace is.
Pace is really important, which is something you can always, which leads into my other question. I mean, how do you approach a role as an actress? When you get a script, you're cast, what's the first thing you look for? You love the story, you love that, the character. But how do you start unraveling this nut of sliding into someone else's skin?
I guess that's a good question. How do I slide into someone else's? Well, that is a process. When I read it, as I'm reading it, I just kind of feel it. I feel it.
How many
It's
times did you read it?
How many times do I read it? If I'm going to, I mean, before I get cast in it, or when I'm preparing to audition?
No.
If I'm preparing, how many times do I read?
No, you've already auditioned. You've been cast in it. Now you're coming to the first table read.
Well, if I'm coming to the first table read, I probably have read it a couple of times. From the first table read, what I get from it is how everybody sees the character. And
Your
then
character, their characters.
how they see my character, and how it makes me feel.
You try to.
How I feel has a lot to do with what I
Oh,
do.
well, yeah. I mean, that was a big win. How do you feel? Do you try to say, okay, let me find the through line, or let me say, what does this character want in this story?
And well, yes, and from my training, that's exactly what do I want? What's in the way? How am I going to get it? The stimulus is always, how do I feel? It's always that with me. And then just to let the feelings go. Yeah.
I've always been a little bit different. And when I approach a scene or a role, I've always been, make sure you step back, Janet.
What?
Make sure you pull back a bit.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
We get down to.
Pulling me in. I want to.
I know. You guys, Alina, we can't lose your eyes. We need your eyes. If I don't know what I want, this is the lazy Doug and the now more scarred Doug from acting. I know that if I don't know what I want, I'm usually going to go down the wrong path. My choices are going to be pushed. They're going to be not sharp, and I'm not going to listen as well. When I figure out, because when I was young, I was like, I'm just going to, for me personally, I'm just going to feel it. Right. And then, which would, for me personally, it would lead me to push all over the place, which was a big no from Wynn to me, like, Doug, too much. too much. Once I started working analytically, and it's probably why I love film, once I understand what this person wants, I start listening better, because then I started looking for how am I getting it or am I not getting it? How can I get it? And so I start being more strategic in my choices and listening better and communicating better, because I know that I'm on a mission. That doesn't mean that it's right for everybody, because I know many actors who are like you or different, that I think probably instinctively, even though you're going from feeling,
Let everything affect me.
yeah,
Just let my, just let it affect me, and whatever comes from that is kind of.
do you mark, when you're going through the scene, do you mark events, to get really analytical? Do you mark events or let it flow from moment to moment? If I were to grab your script, does it look like it's been broken down, or if there's just a lot of specific notes only you would get?
Probably notes that I would get.
Yes.
Yeah, probably that, because sometimes it's different for different things.
Yeah.
Like if I'm doing comedy, it probably would have notations in it that are a little more technical.
And for actors who don't know, comedy is 10 times harder than drama.
Yeah, yes. So that would be more technical to me than bearing my soul. Yes, it is different. And,
It's very different.
It is harder to do comedy.
One of the things I remember, I'm a big student, so I remember reading about Edward Albee's another favorite, my playwright. And I know his father did Count of Monte Cristo, which was a big burden for him because that's all he could do. It drove a lot of anger in his father, which drove, he abused Edward, and Edward strove to drink and go away. But his father was, cursed with only being able to do Count of Monte Cristo. And he was an actor as well, Edward Albee, not Edward, Eugene O'Neill, sorry. Eugene O'Neill. As I've been doing the play now for 10 years, I start thinking, I kind of understand the burden a little bit now. I didn't get it when I was a young actor. When you do the same play over and over, you start working on different skills than you did the first time you put it up or the first year you put it up. You start working on, how do I make this play today in Champaign, Illinois, 8 year in, relevant to myself, so I'm given a relevant performance? What do I find? And you have to start looking, you start really focusing on language and moments and little things. Today, I'm going to focus on this character, and I'm going to really try to perfect this laugh. And it's a different skill set, right? It's a different challenge that you don't think you're going to have until you do a play for a real long time. But what I love about it is, because I struggled so much as an actor and I studied with so many different people, I use the whole toolbox in the play. Like I use everything. I use Meisner, I use substitution, I use the analytical part, questions. What do I want? Make them, make the audience understand this moment. And the play has many ghosts of directors over the years that have filtered into me. And I think in many ways, that is what acting is, is because when you first study,
right?
Really? What's that?
Meisner is a great one for letting people affect you, which is kind of what I do.
Yeah, that was Win Handman's whole thing. It was Meisner. I mean, he was Sandy Meisner's right hand man. So it was all Meisner technique. It was nonstop. He had his own version of it. He had Here's a great question for you. One of the great exercises Win had, he would have you do a character interview, and he would say, all right, Janet, today you're playing Blanche. What's going on with Blanche today? And he would ask you these set of questions, and what do you think about tomorrow? And why are you so upset right now? And you would get into the character that way. And it was mesmerizing.
Blanche.
Oh, I know you. That's why I made that joke in that email. Have you ever heard of this one?
Yeah, right.
But what was one of the most, and I still hold on to that exercise sometimes. I still hold on to it. And I don't do it the way I did it in class back then, but I'll ask myself these questions, like, what's going on with me today? Is there an exercise that you still hold on to from when you were young?
Well, yeah, but I don't remember whose method it was, but I was in a class and we had to do, was a private moment. And I said, no, what kind of thing do you want? And then people were going to bathroom and doing all kinds of things. And he said, what you do that you don't want anybody else to see you doing. So I got on my knees and I prayed because that's something I do alone. That's the only thing that I could think of. But I think the private moment there
That's a great one.
is something that we certainly outplayed in a lot of Blanche.
Well, yeah, it gets to the gut of what's going on with the character.
Right.
And you can hold on to that, right?
That private moment exercise did something to me. That's all I can say. And then bringing in something for one class, something that we were holding on to for years, and just bring it to class. And then I was touching it, feeling it, and getting an emotional feeling from it, which was, in my case, rejection. And those two things, that's when I started finding out what was inside of me. And I think it's important to know what's inside of you if you're going to be other people.
Yeah.
Because nobody else knows that except you. Doesn't make any sense at all.
No, it does, because you're talking to an actor. Yeah, absolutely, because one question, but what I would imagine that you use a lot of your personal past in your work. I have a feeling you use a lot of your personal past, either not knowing not really connecting to your father because he passed away early, or issues you had with your family, mother being being raised by not your biological parents, being rejected and feeling lost. I'm sure I would imagine as an actress you use those emotions, those feelings still percolate in the system.
Still pumping in there.
They're still pumping in there. And I have similars. I grew up in a very turbulent childhood. Didn't get along well with my father, but I remember working with a great actor, and I haven't been in touch with him. And I told him that, and he said, "You are so lucky. You have no idea." I was like, "What the fuck is he talking about?" He says, "You have a history to pull from. You have no idea how lucky you are to pull from that history as an actor." I thought he was off his rocker, but he was right. And within this play, specifically the letter that I do with the father who loses his son, I go right back every time, to different moments in my childhood to find that thing that really hits me.
Yes, you have something very rich to draw from.
Yeah. And you draw from it, and it becomes something.
Feelings are still there. That's that they're and it's so easy to pull to the surface. Because living in you.
Do you ever use music to get going, or like?
Oh, sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yes, depending on what I'm doing. So, there's definitely music that makes me feel like dancing, and gets you revved up to do something different, like comedy.
I'm a big music guy.
Yes. And the music that I love to listen to, I love Gershwin. I love listening to everything Gershwin. I don't know that I use it, but I love listening to it. I love Italian tenors. I listen to them as well. I don't know that I use it to affect what my work is. I'm not sure about that, but it could.
Yeah, I do use music to affect my work. I always have. My work, because I didn't study acting young, I had to find different things to put me in the mood. When I was studying acting, I've been lucky as an actor, and I don't know how maybe it's my soul or something, but I've been blessed to work with some amazing, and now I'm in a conversation with you, and I would put you into that bucket of people that have blessed me. I've been blessed to either study or work with incredibly talented and experienced actors, even from an early age, and who would share wisdom with me. And I grew up in Houston, and I used to study with a lady named Chris Wilson. She had a theater company here, and she was a Broadway actress, but she moved back to Houston. Her husband, his name was Jim, and they've both passed, but they had a wonderful theater company. Their son, Brandon Smith, did a lot of film and TV. He just passed away, unfortunately. And her husband Jim had worked with Paul Newman. That was always the talk, and they had pictures of him and Paul Newman. Um, but she used to hate it. She would cast me in plays, and she was a hard ass in class. You had to work in to be cast in her plays. You had to be in her class, so you would take her class, and she's strict as crap. And I once got kicked out of class. She didn't like my attitude. I was young. I was full of it, but she brought me back. Her son, who directed me later in plays, she goes, "Look, Doug, she likes you, but you have to watch it with my mom." Because but she
How
hated
old were
that.
you when you were doing this in this
Oh,
class?
I was, shit, how old was I? I was maybe 25, 20, yeah, 24, 25. I thought I knew everything. I was,
Yeah, yeah, that's typical. 20-year-olds. Yeah, when I was 20 years old, I knew everything too.
I knew everything. And she wasn't having any of it. She didn't have the attitude of, well, I'll deal with the young kid. I'll try to guide him in there. No, it was like, get out. I won't have that kind of talk back in my class. It was never disrespectful, what I would say, but I would argue with her about character or something. Anyhow, but she always cast me and she knew that I was always committed. She hated that before I would go on to a play, I would listen to, back then, I would listen to music through my headphones.
Oh, okay.
And that's how I would prepare myself. Right before I go on, I would be listening to music. You can't focus that way. You have to be knowing what the character is doing. How do you know when to go on? I can tell. I know when people are going on. I don't need to know. Once I have physical cues, she let me do it, but she's like, I don't. But the work was good, so she allowed it, right? And she said, and there would be days when she said, "You were very good today, Douglas. You were very good today." She goes, "But I
That
don't."
must have meant a lot, huh?
It did.
Yeah.
It penetrates the soul when someone you respect like that tells you that. It penetrates the soul. But she would still say, I wish you would go on without music. To this day, I still do it. When I go on stage, I have my headphones on. I look at the light cue and then I take off my headphones and walk on stage.
How did you put together your military show, that beautiful show that I saw you?
Well, I mean, I've told
And
the
what
story a
was your
lot.
inspiration for that? What was your inspiration to do that?
9/11.
Oh, okay.
I came out of the North Towers after the first plane hit. And so I was deeply affected. I was in the financial district when all that happened and saw the towers fall. And so, as that moment, it affected everybody, but it affected New Yorkers deeper and people who came out of the building and saw the buildings fall even deeper. I kind of have this tier of how it affects the people, the country. And so if you were coming out of the building and if you were directly affected by the buildings, it goes to a different level. So I was really, America in that time was, I'm sure you remember after 9/11, we were so patriotic and you couldn't even get an American flag anywhere. New York was an amazing place. It was an amazing community to be part of and theater-wise, everything. It was a weird place, but I became affected. I became addicted to reading stories about men and women who were going to Iraq and Afghanistan. And I was really angry. I wanted revenge. I was one of the people, I wanted us to go over there and blow them all up to pieces. I was so angry. My life had been turned upside down. City was turned upside down. Yeah, I was angry. And so I started reading stories around 2008, 2009. I started reading stories about men and women, specifically men who couldn't pay their bills, who were doing 4 or 5 deployments, 6 deployments. They were coming back and they didn't have any money. They couldn't pay their bills. And there's a couple particular stories. And there was one story of a gentleman who he was going knocking on doors in his neighborhood, asking for odd end jobs so he could support his family. And he had done multiple deployments. And I thought it was very unfair. And New York is a very jaded city. It's a very jaded city. And people try to move on faster than they should, but I understand it. And that's a story that's been true since World War One. After the end of World War One, people were trying to forget World War One. No one wanted to talk about World War One. They wanted to move on. It's human nature. We want to move on. We don't want to talk about tragedy forever. We don't want to move on, but the challenge with that is the people who are involved in that tragedy or who are involved in that war, they get to carry that forever. And that's the challenge as a society and as a community and as a culture. We have to remember that we get to move on, but someone who lost their arm, lost their leg, lost their brother, they don't get to move on.
Yeah.
And so I decided to write a play. As an actor, I wanted to do material that I wanted to do. In New York, I was always doing plays that I was not the good plays like Stanley or Of Mice and Men, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Those were hard to get. They were hard to get because every guy that looked like me, every straight heterosexual guy was coming in there, right? And so it was a lot of competition. And you would get some of them, but for the most part, as a young actor in New York, you were doing crap plays. You were doing crap plays that you didn't connect. They were stupid. Directors were horrible because usually crap plays have bad directors, and and you're like, oh gosh, this play and this person, and I want to do something that I want to do. And so I was blessed with I was a personal trainer. That's how I paid my bills. I had a wonderful human. He was a gay actor, and his story was amazing. He lived in the village with his husband, and he was another historian. His name was John Hawkins. I still remember him to this day. We were very different politically aligned, but we always respected each other. We would have conversations, and he loved tennis and he loved Lancer Wilson. That was our bond. And he loved theater. And we would talk and stuff, and we would argue, but in a respectful way. At that time, it was during the Iraq War. I wanted war. I wanted war. I wanted war, and I wanted revenge. And he was, I don't know if he was a pacifist, but he was anti-war. He would hear me talk about these stories, and he started bringing me newspaper articles of veterans. At that time, the New York Times was wonderful because they used to have two sections. They had a section in the early 2000s where they would review a play, and they would talk about the playwright and the actors in it. And then they had another section, because it was during the Middle East, they would talk about stories that veterans were struggling with, and they would tell veteran stories. So it was kind of like a library. Every newspaper was just filled with non-biased, for an actor, just a wealth of information. It's not the same paper anymore. He would do these cutouts, which I still have, and he would give them to me. And to look at this story, I think you'll find this resonating. And I would just be like moved by it. And the next week when I would train him, he'd give me another story and another story. And he would cut out stories from World War I, and then he would give me. We had a huge storm in New York called Sandy and hurricane. I had a whole cutout about this big, Janet, of theatrical reviews of plays, but they weren't just reviews of plays. They broke down the playwright, the through lines, and what the play was trying to get to. It was a wealth of information for a young actor. I lost them all during the storm. I would talk, and he would tell me, "You need to write a play, Douglas." That's what he would tell me. I said, "Nah, I'm not a writer, John. I've always been very insecure as an actor." He goes, "You need to write a play. You need to write a play. You need to write a play." He says, "Why don't you start writing a play?" And I said, "I don't even know how to write, John." So long story short, not to make this an interview about me, but I started going to the New York Public Library and doing research. Fast forward, I got connected with Craig Lucas. I took he was teaching a writing class, and so I thought I had a play, and he said, "Oh, darling, you don't have a play. You have a one-man show. No one is going to be able to do this play for you. You need to do it." And that's what got me to create it. Then I took a solo show workshop. Long story short, then I put it together. My goal was to tell Americans, specifically New Yorkers, that we were at war. We had men and women who were suffering, who were not being treated right, and we needed to know that. I never knew that I'd be on this journey 10 years later, 35 cities, 40 states.
It's wonderful. It really is. And it's patriotic, and it spreads that feeling. And I just hope you keep on doing it, because it's just really wonderful.
Yeah, well, as they say, as long as the acting gods keep blessing me with the opportunities, I'll keep doing it. But it's a challenge because you keep wondering, is the story still relevant? And as an actor, as an artist, you start thinking, it's kind of like doing a Neil Simon play in a way, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, you do a Neil Simon play and you're like,
yeah, we have cell phones now. That's
yeah. You grab the phone off the wall, and you're like, I don't even know what that means, And so that's the challenge with the play. But let me ask, because I don't want to. I know I don't want to wrap you. I want to start wrapping us up, but I wanted to ask you just a couple more questions. How do you approach, how do you, as a director, because I know you've directed a lot, how do you approach working with actors as a director with your knowing, how do you approach your actors as a director with the experience as an actress?
I think you've talked about it before when you said that you work with some actors and some directors that are terrible because they just insult you. I kind of had those experiences too, so I've learned not to be that way. I do a lot of homework. I really go over the play scene by scene, and I move through it myself as the characters. Isn't that
Smart.
ridiculous?
Oh,
I move through it myself and write down certain things about what should happen to build, because each scene is a different story. What should tell that story in that scene? And then I talk to the actors about it and I listen. And they bring so much to it. I think that's what we do. And I have to say that, and it's from teaching too, because I taught it
Loyola.
for years. And we do a lot of side coaching. So when somebody's got something going, I side coach. I say, that's great. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. And it gives them confidence and they really then give. And so I do things like that.
It's smart that you go through the play. When I directed my TV series, I was really nervous. I reached out to every director I ever worked with and I asked for film directors, tips, anything they would give me. And for young actors, I'd always say I would invite them for lunch or a cup of coffee. I said, I'll pay for your lunch. I'll pay for coffee. And I took their notes and always write down their notes. I had a belief when someone gives you notes, take a pen and paper and you write down their notes and let them see you write down their notes. It shows that you respect what they're saying to you. But that's just me.
Another thing I do is I try to keep actors moving because a lot of times in plays where people are talking for a long time, and sometimes I've seen plays where they just sit on the stage and they're talking. I think of ways to get them up, to go coach, go get something, get a cup of coffee, bring it back to the table, offer somebody something. I mean, just something that, just little activities that keep them moving instead of just sitting.
Yeah. Motion, action.
Right. Yeah. That's
Yeah, I was really good with that on stage. But what I was going to say is one of the notes that one of the actors, directors gave me said, your homework as a director is to know your blocking for your actors
absolutely. I get all of that done before I see them.
and and for film storyboard. You need to storyboard. He said, because it doesn't mean you have to be married to those two things, but you have a plan. And actors will respond to you as the captain of the ship because they see you have a plan. Because if you go in there, and I know, I'm sure there's plenty of talented directors that, who are like, well, what do you want to do? And they can,
Right.
right. But for the most part, most directors suck when they do that. Most times when you get in a play or a production and they say, what do you want to do? For the most part, you're probably about to sink. You're like, I need
the ones that tell you, you just keep doing things, and I'll tell you what I like when I see it.
That's the best. I've had that one. That's the best. Or oh yeah, that's the best. Or even worse on theater, I had one director who would stage us first day of the reading, block us. I mean, he would block us. And I would say, you can't block us right now, dude. I mean, there's no way you can. I don't even know if I'm going to want to do this move in the play, just like you said, there's bad directors out there. But that coming to set, I would say, I think I want her here and I want him here and I want a 2-shot here or a wide here. That gave us a language to talk to the DP and allow the actress to say, oh, I like that. Or what if we did this? Oh, I like that too. Let's try that. Mm-hmm. But you're coming from a base compared to, so that's really smart on your part, going through all the characters and knowing having an idea where the characters want to go, because then that allows me as an actor to feel comfortable that, okay, I'm with a director who I mean, she's not a dictator, but she has a plan. And that's all you want. You just want to be with someone who has a plan.
And listen, if something doesn't work and I see it, I say, let's just change it. I was wrong. Don't
Yeah.
don't end the scene like that. Let's end the scene this way.
Yeah. You know what? You were right. You were
Right.
right, Janet. We should go. You know what? You're right. Put the coffee cup down there. That makes more sense.
Right.
Yeah. That's a big deal because a lot of directors, they just won't admit they're wrong. They just won't do it. And they don't usually last, but you get to experience them. And that's a horrible experience because you're like, I have two choices, either leave the play or suck on stage. And so most of the time we suck on stage because you don't want to leave the play.
That's true.
You find the ways. That's great. Is there a performance that has stayed with you the longest in your history as an actress or as a director that has never left you, a role or a show, and why?
It took a long time to lose Blanche de Wrong because it didn't affect me while I was doing that. And it's a lot of, I'm going to say energy that gets used up. And a lot of that stayed with me. Another one is I played Flo Goforth in Milk Train Doesn't Stop Here Anymore. And that's another one.
I don't know that play.
It's it's Tennessee Williams, and it's a combination of all of his women, and she is charming and decadent,
Vindictive.
yeah, all of that, and she has a young man, and she's old, and she's dying, and so that's when the characters are so full and they're so rich.
Oh,
And it it lives in you for a while, and it's just
yeah.
hard to let go of it. It's just like getting an earworm, you know?
No, I know. I
Please
know.
go away.
Mine is mine is George and Of Mice and Men.
Oh,
You know, and the play is so it's too expensive to do. It's the only challenge with these plays. There are so many characters, but wouldn't that be a great play to do now? A modern version.
yes. Yes, it would be.
It'd be amazing. You know, you could do a George and a big Mexican gentleman. You know, and do it in a modern way. But yeah, that play is always there's so many layers in that play. There's always a layer about immigration and everything. I get emotional thinking about it. But he basically has to murder his best friend, you know,
Yes.
and he has to kill him. And he says, if anybody's going to kill him, I'm going to kill him. He's my dog. Because Candy kills his dog. They kill Candy's dog in the play.
Yeah.
And then Lenny
You just went still for a little while.
Oh, did I? That was me. I went still on purpose. I was thinking, yeah, but that's great. What's the biggest challenge you faced in your career and how'd you overcome it as an actress?
Biggest challenge in my career. Are you talking about a singular role? Or are you just talking about a time? Time. Okay. So, okay, let's go back to working at the Beverly and getting paid well and all of that and fire. Let's go back to that. And then nothing is going on in the city. Well, things are going on in the city, but it's either if you have an equity card, you can't work in them.
Why? Because it was all
Nobody else is paying you because everything else is volunteer on a volunteer basis. So that was a challenge there. And finally, somebody from the union came down and said, we realize you've just gone through this. There's very little work here, and we're going to turn our heads for a little while, and you just work wherever you can.
COVID.
And, yeah. Happily, I found some directors around here that would pay me. And that was Not that I needed the money, because I don't, because I was teaching the entire time. But and that's another challenge, is teaching all day and going to rehearsals at night. Yes. Um,
We do it
we do it.
because we're athletes of the heart.
The thing is that I just had to hold on to something. So I did a lot of community work. And
So if you were going to distill that, and that was an obstacle, how do you mentally overcome that obstacle? And how would you
how did I mentally overcome it?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, because many times I worked with actors who weren't from here saying, well, you should come to LA, or you should go to New York, or blah, 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 all that stuff. One actor, director friend that I worked with on many, many things, many projects at Southern Rep Theater, which was also became an equity hub. His name was Joe Warfield, and he directed me in several things. We became great friends, and he's no longer with us, but I think about him all the time. And he said, why would you want to do that, Janet? You are constantly here. You want to go to New York and sit by your telephone? No.
He's right. He's right.
Be happy with what you have here.
Yeah.
So I am, yes.
Grass is always green on the other side, but people forget there's probably manure on top of that grass.
And the other thing is, you have children, right?
Yeah, 15 and 12.
Yeah, okay. Well, mine are a lot older than that. But I have children. I have now grandchildren, too. I don't get to see them very much, but I'm here. And I have a connection with them, and they, it's nice to be where they can find me.
Good. What lesson would you pass on to young actors? What's the most valuable lesson you can give to young actors?
Learn as much as you can, work as hard as you can, but stay humble. Stay humble. Because there's always more. There's always more. It's never finished. And you never stop learning. Always keep open to learn new things, work with other people, discover other cultures. I mean, just keep your brain open and keep working and keep the passion, and don't let people discourage you. Don't let people make you feel like you need to grovel, because you don't. Just do the work. Do the work. That's all I would say. When I would teach in the School of the Arts where I taught, I would tell my students when they were leaving, don't let the assholes get you down, because they'll try to.
They will. Well, that's very powerful wisdom. And I think what you said, there's always more. And that's the biggest challenge in this industry. You always want more. You're always looking at people who have more. And we forget as actors, the person who has more is looking at the other person who has more. And it's never ending. Another actor in New York, his name was Ed. I forgot his last name. Ned. A prominent film actor, but he saw my play and we became friends. So that's the thing about acting, theater, that just talking to you, I'm thinking of him, and he came and saw my play, and he didn't have to see my play. It was just being workshopped. I met him at a reading somewhere, and he came and saw me. And I was just so grateful that he came, got on the subway and saw my play in a piece of shit theater, and he said, man, this is good, man. This is good. But I would ask him from time to time for, gosh, maybe emotional just thinking about Ned, sweet man. I said, I was looking for help, professional help, like I need an agent, I need a manager, and he said, the thing about this business, man, he said, it's like a race. We're always looking at the asses in front of us, but we forget how many asses are behind us. And that's always stayed with me. He actually shared a personal story. He said, he had worked with Mel Gibson. He had done good films, good movies. Those people are always inviting their own friends to their country clubs, to their private clubs. I'm never getting invited, and I'm being left out. They have their own version of their old boys network. And he said, everyone is being left out at some level. And like you said, always want more. And that's the biggest challenge is just, that's what I try to tell people is one, focus on the work, but do work. Don't wait for the phone to ring. Write a play, shoot a film, do something for yourself. Make that your passion, not waiting for, the TV series to come on or Broadway production because it's not going to happen. And if it does, great. We're in the only industry that you're unemployed the moment you're employed.
Right.
It's the only industry where the moment you get cast in like perfect play, amazing space, perfect role, it's a 4-week run. Like, oh, I couldn't have dreamed it. In 4 weeks, you're going to be unemployed again. And this play's over with. Lucky maybe gets a tiny extension, maybe it goes somewhere, but it's a short ride, and you have to cherish it and then cherish that moment and then find another moment, and focus on the craft and getting better. But it's harder I don't know how you think about it, and maybe we'll wrap on this, but probably should have wrapped on the last thing. It was so beautifully said, but it's harder and it's easier today, but I kind of feel like the younger actors, they don't want to study the craft anymore,
You know what? I think a lot of younger actors are looking for celebrity. Yes. And it's not about that at all. I mean, some actors become celebrities, but most of the actors I know are just working actors. They just do the work and then they get this job and that job, maybe this film, maybe a little part here, there. And there are thousands of them. And they're not celebrities.
No. And even the ones who become celebrities at some point are not celebrities.
Yeah.
And I mean,
but that's not, I can't think of a worse kind of life than to have people around me all the time, wanting to know what I had for breakfast, that kind of stuff. And how many, and who's my dress designer and who they don't, and then all of that stuff is just have to engage on too many levels with things that don't matter. It's just better to be content to do the work.
Do the work. That's a great way for us to end. Yeah. So you're doing a play right now.
And directing one too.
Where are you doing the play? What's its run? And where are you directing the play? Okay. Where's its run?
At JPAC, I'm doing Murder on the Nile. This weekend coming up is our last weekend. Concurrently, I am directing Joe and Marilyn.
Is that about Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio?
That's right. 2 characters. And I have 2 fabulous actors. I mean, they're both so good.
Where are you doing that at?
That's going to be in the West Wego Theater. So, yeah. And we had a photo shoot the other night, and it was great to see Marilyn in that white dress doing this,
I studied with Alec Baldwin, and he had worked with, what was the playwright husband? He knew Arthur Miller, and somehow through the grapevine, he heard the story, but there was a story where Marilyn Monroe performed for the USO troops during the Second World War, and she was like, and apparently the story goes, she came back and she goes, Joe, it was amazing, Joe. It was a stadium filled with people and they were cheering my name. You have any idea what that feels like? And Joe goes, 4 times a week, honey. 4 times a week.
That's in the play.
Did I quote it right?
Yeah. He says, yeah, Joe, what do you know what it's like to have 65,000 people cheering for you? He says, I think I do, babe.
Yeah. I think I do, babe. I think I do. He was
so that opens on March 13th.
Okay. Well, make sure you tag me on Facebook so I can share it. I don't know too many people in New Orleans, but people will follow this podcast and you never know. And I'll share it and I'll promote it as much as I can. And
It's such a pleasure talking to you.
well,
Really.
it was the
I've
pleasure is
enjoyed
all
it
mine.
immensely.
The pleasure is
Yeah.
completely all mine. And her name is Janet Shea. If anybody
Right.
wants to find her, she's only on Facebook, I believe.
Facebook. Yeah, I don't have any of,
Okay.
Instagram or any of that other stuff.
She is the First Lady of New Orleans, and it's been an absolutely honor. And I think for young actors out there, I hope when you listen to this episode, you can do the work is the most important thing I think she shared with us. Do the work.
I think so. I think so.
All right. Thanks for everybody for listening to the Actors Podcast. Until the next episode.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and found it informative in some way. And if you did, I appreciate a like, a good review. And as always, keep believing, keep working, and always keep dreaming.